there's only so much of that you can do in a corporate space. And when I decided to create Spiritual Boss Chick and do something in the entrepreneurial space, it wasn't because I didn't love my job. I love my job. I love what I get to do. And I feel honored to do it every day. And so it wasn't, there's always this 80-20 rule. You love 80% of it and there's 20 that you're like, I just got to muscle through that part, right? But 80% of it I absolutely love, and I don't. So I'm not one of these entrepreneurs that are out there like, girl, you need to get rid of your 9 to 5, right? It's like, pump your brakes, Turbo. I don't need to get rid of my 9. I love my 9 to 5. And I find purpose in the work that I'm doing. And as long as I'm feeling that way, I will continue to do that work.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, it's Erin, and I am just beyond excited to let you spend the next hour with our next guest, Dr. Kennedy Garcia. What a light, what a gem this woman is. And Dr. Garcia, has her PhD from Stanford and is currently the Senior Director of Compliance, Transformation, and Organizational Change at Kaiser Permanente. And she may do a few other things, like she's a 6-time pageant holder. In fact, she's competing for Mrs. Universe in a couple of months, actually probably later this month when this is released. She founded a nonprofit organization that gives scholarships to women. She is the founder of Spiritual Boss Chick, which is a coaching platform that really is about helping women reach their full potential and crush opportunities. She basically wants every woman to know they're a queen. She's an international coach, a motivational speaker. She just developed an app called Reign, REIGN. We talk a little bit about that in the podcast. It's in beta. And she's also working on her first book called Finding Your Fears. And most importantly, she is the most caring, loving, funny, inspirational woman that I think you will take many, many pieces of advice and inspiration from after listening to her. So anyways, without further ado, here is Dr. Kennedy Garcia. So first we have to just start like how we met.
I am so grateful for being at this event where there were just hundreds of women who just wanted to support each other and uplift each other and help share their knowledge and transfer their positive energy to the people around the room. And that was the one thing that was like, you had this glowing halo of energy around you. And I was like, oh my God, like we have to know each other. We have to meet each other.
Glowing halo, masked by a ponytail, and Adidas track running pants. So Kennedy, we were at the She Who Wins Summit last month. Our listeners have heard us talk about it before. Our great friend Renee Bauer put it on for the second year in a row. We both were speakers. And I had never met Dr. Garcia. I actually had no idea who she was. We have some pre-meets on Instagram, but it's overwhelming, right? And so Renee really had sort of asked some of us to sit in these couches at the front of the room that she had placed because, of course, the whole place just looked like, the most amazing conference ever. And so Nicole and I both were up there. And then, here I am in my black Adidas track pants, my black jacket, and my black Be Authentic t-shirt, because I had a different vibe, new keynote. I had this sort of like 50-50 rule, outfit going on. And in walks literally a freaking beauty queen, which I didn't know at the time, in this gorgeous red suit that's like flowing, which, you could be intimidated by, but oh my gosh, Kennedy, you have such a presence in just inclusivity and warmth and genuine like nature that, just all that beauty and presence that you could be intimidated by flies by. And so Kennedy and I sit down and, it's literally like, nice to meet you. And she says to me, I love your outfit. And I, being the totally authentic, sometimes, puke exactly what I'm thinking out of my mouth, unfiltered, knowing that I'm wearing something different than I normally do to, event, I said, "Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm usually not this black." To which you responded,
I'm always this black.
"Yeah." And I was like, oh my God, way too foot in your mouth / softball / I think this woman could be my jam. And no, but your energy was great. I'm sure you're excited to be on this podcast. However, I may not make it as great as you think, because I'm going to challenge you, miss. I am going to challenge you to get messy and to get raw and authentic. So, obviously since that day, I've gotten to know you better, whether it was, sitting on the couch together and then of course, researching, stalking you to prep for the talk. And I will say in pure authenticity, when I listen to you and see everything you're doing, I am equal parts inspired and equal parts intimidated and overwhelmed, because you've done so much. And so I don't want to start at the here and now, because, and our listeners already heard your bio. I read it before we got on. And it's easy to be inspired, but also to be like, oh my God, like this woman has done so much. I haven't, I've barely scratched the surface. But I want to break it down. I want to see how you got there, because gosh, it couldn't have been easy. And I actually want to start with something that you threw out on podcast in like lightning speed and went past it. I want to start back when you were 15 years old and you sped past it. You said, I was heading into my senior in high school. I had to rewind. I was like, that math doesn't make sense. My daughter is 15. She's a freshman. And something about your father crying because you had chemotherapy. So take us back to 15-year-old Kennedy and tell us what was going on in your life.
Yeah, most of my friends were trying to figure out who they were going to prom with and planning for the upcoming senior cut day, which I guess people plan for before the senior year even starts. And it was the second time in my life that I'd actually seen my father cry. And to me, that was the weight of the situation. So I was laying there in the hospital and they were trying to figure out what was wrong. And my mother had been asking the doctor and trying to consult before it got to this point. And they kept telling her, don't worry about it. She's young. Her body will do what it's going to do. And I don't think your listeners want me to be as graphic as I could about explaining what that meant, but I had not reached womanhood yet at 15, right? And my mom was really concerned about that because she's like, most girls start their cycles when they're about 13. And it's a little strange to me that you haven't. And all of a sudden, there was just this constant bleeding and a bunch of pain and things that should never be considered normal. And so finally, they did all these tests and came back. And I remember, I will never forget the look on my dad's face when he came into the room. So the doctors didn't come into the room and tell me. He came into the room to tell me what I was going to have to go through in order to be healthy. And he sits at the side of my bed and, he starts to talk and he starts to do it like in the very strong, law enforcement voice that he uses all the time. And he just couldn't get through it without starting to cry. And so he says, you are going to have to go through treatment but we're going to do whatever we can do to make sure that we beat this cancer and get you well for college. And I thought, I wasn't sure what that meant at 15, right? I was very naive too. I was extremely smart, very book smart, but my parents sheltered me. So I'll just be clear. So I was pretty naive and I wasn't sure what that really meant to me because I had an aunt who had brain cancer and they told her that she was going to have 6 months to live, but she was still living and she was still like the aunt where you could go over to her house and she had like a candy drawer and she'd be ready with like a bunch of different, treats and stuff for you when you get there. And And this was 10 years past the time that they told her that she wasn't going to live anymore. So in my mind, a cancer diagnosis wasn't really a life-threatening illness, but it was the weight of seeing my father's emotions and seeing him cry that let me know how serious this really was. And I was taken aback by that part more so than what am I going to have to go through? Because I knew that no matter what I had in front of me, I had the support of my loving and amazing family behind me. And I always felt like that made me invincible.
Yeah. It's so interesting. You obviously were able to overcome that. I can't help but think and wonder. So, 15-year-old Kennedy, that's obviously book smart because you're skipping a couple of grades, you're speeding past school, right? You're also a Black woman, but you're also a Black woman whose father was a professional baseball player for some time. Where did you sit in feeling, privileged, not privileged? Like, it just, I really wrestle with, like, what was that propeller behind you? Was it simply just great parents? Were you wrestling at all with, I have to work, 2 or 3 times as hard as my wife like, where were you at, high school Kennedy and sort of probably a perplexing identity?
Yeah. It's really complex, to be honest, because so I grew up in a neighborhood that was predominantly white. My parents were just brilliant minded people, and they could see challenges before they even came about. And so they would try everything they could to circumvent and be proactive in managing those potential challenges, right? I'll give you an example. When my parents had their house built in a community that we ended up living in, and the person who had built the lot or bought the lot, sorry, next to us started a petition so that my parents couldn't get their house. He ended up being our neighbor for 20 something years. And the guy will tell you he probably did not speak to us more than 5 times the entire time we lived there. And so my parents thought, I want to put our children in the best environments and in safe environments, given that now my father was in law enforcement and people couldn't follow him into where we lived and they couldn't, find out how to get to our house and things like that. And so they were thinking out of protection for our family and, just having a great upbringing for us that we would be safe in this area, but didn't realize we'd have to worry about the people who were actually in the neighborhood itself. And then they thought about, well, if this is what's happening with the neighbor, what are the schools like? Right. And so here's where they started to think and be proactive about what they're going to do. They sent us to school on an Air Force base instead of in the city that we lived in, and purposely bought this lot and built this house there because we would be in close proximity to get there. And it would be within, our ability to decide which school we were going to go to. And they knew that going to school on an Air Force base would be a lot different for me than going to school in the city where even the neighbor didn't want us there. Right.
Were your parents former Air Force or they just?
My dad was former Army.
Interesting.
It happened to be that there was an Air Force base that was close by. And my dad's like, yep, we're going to buy that land, build that house, be right there. You're going to go to school down there. Because that people who are on an Air Force base are coming in and out, they're, being stationed there. So you have a potential for greater diversity than you do in a city that is 99.97% white. Right. And so thank God that they did that. Because I didn't feel like the only one at school amongst my friends. That we were all different races, ethnicities, religions. Like we had so much diversity in our little bubble that it really gave me the foundation that I needed to not feel like I was different all the time. And so I think because of that, it also created this false pretense of what the world was like. Right. And I didn't really have an awareness of my privilege until I was probably in college and graduating from undergrad, to be honest, because I never saw myself as privileged. I never, I didn't recognize that the life experiences that I had because of my dad's connection to baseball and the types of people that we were around on a regular basis. I didn't have the concept that everybody else's life wasn't like that. I did not think about how those experiences kind of shaped and formed me until I got to college. And then in undergrad, I had friends who were like, oh, yeah, we're going to go to Switzerland for the break because we have a house there. Do you want to come? And I was like, kind of did that already, but you guys have fun. I didn't have fun when I did. I don't want to spend my break doing that. I'd done that, right? And then I sort of thought to myself, because they were like, and I think it's other people pointing out the privilege that I had, which I just did not even recognize because I literally lived it. It just wasn't something I was focused on. I felt blessed that I was in the world and I had I call borrowed time, right? Because when you survive life-threatening situations, and that 15-year-old girl wasn't the only time that I had to face a life-threatening situation, right? And so I always felt like I'm on borrowed time. I'm going to make the best and I'm going to be intentional about how I spend it. And I'm so grateful for every experience, but I never saw that as this is the privilege. But I think part of your question was about this sense of feeling the pressure to work harder. And I've had that since I was a kid. And I think most families who are families of color, at least the ones that I know, have all sat their kids down and said to them, right, whether it was true or not, they said, these are the things that you're going to have to deal with because of what you look like. You're going to have to work twice as hard, and that's okay. You're going to have to temper yourself in the presence of certain people because you're going to be looked upon differently. When you say something and you speak up for yourself, you're going to be called aggressive. And your counterparts who don't look like you will not be called aggressive. They will be called passionate. And so you need to learn very quickly to have emotional intelligence. My parents were teaching us about emotional intelligence when we were children. And don't even get me started with my dad's a cop, but he's telling my brother, my sister, and I, listen, when you get pulled over, you 10 and 2 it, don't move your hands until they walk and ask you to move and get. I don't care if you want to help out and be proactive and have it ready. Nope. Leave your hands where they can see them. And don't move them until they get to the window. And then here's where privilege came in again. All of our cars. So my dad, we all got to pick our cars when we were 16, me when I was 15. Because I was a senior in high school, my parents wanted me to be able to drive. And so my dad was a cop, right? So I could get away with it.
Unbelievable.
So he registered our cars to the department that he was working for at the time, right? So if you pulled me over and if you ran my plates first, it actually said California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation or whatever it was at the time, right? And so they would assume that the person who was being pulled over is an officer. And then it's like such a relaxed conversation when they come up to the window. They're like, yeah, which department? And then they see how young you are. And they're like, okay, which parent do you have that works?
They know the playbook.
Right. And so, I mean, not that I ever got pulled over.
No, you're a perfect angel.
You know, saying what
if you were to.
Oh my God, I got pulled over all the time. And
I'm so glad. This is what I'm trying to dig out. All the imperfections of Dr. Kennedy Garcia. It'll be in the title. The most imperfect woman you've ever met. No, just kidding.
I had a lead foot. And so I would get pulled over all the time. I was going so fast one time, one of my dad's friends pulled me over. And he says, you have two options. You can either promise me that you are going to slow down and you are going to park this car for the rest of the day, or I'm calling your dad and telling him how fast you were.
A conversation he had not had much that day.
And I was like, I'll take pulling over and parking for 500 Alex. Because the last thing I wanted was for you to call my dad. But yeah, so I, as an adult, I can see privilege all over my life, right? I see it with 20/20 vision, but like everything else in hindsight, that's what you have. In the moment, I definitely didn't see it as privilege. And I would say that I worked hard, not just because they told me I had to work twice as hard, but because I felt like I had such an amazing childhood that I felt like I owed it to them to be my best. They invested so much in me. They invested so much in all of us that I felt like I didn't want that investment to be in vain. And as a parent now, I get that that's just unconditional love. And they were never looking for me to give them anything from, based on how they loved us. But as a kid, that's not, that's a different mindset than what I had as a kid. As a kid, I thought, oh my gosh, my parents give us everything they have, everything they are. And that has to be recognized in a way that I can recognize it. And my thought process was be great at everything that you can.
Well, and I bring up the privilege part because I know you've talked about that before. I've heard you talk about it, but knowing all that you've done and knowing what your parents did, like, I want to be really careful. Like, it was hard-earned privilege. Like, it's privilege with a different looking P, And so I think you honoring and saying that, but at the same time, and I don't need to tell you this, but this was not luck. This was earned privilege that you continue to have and to give back to others. I want to go, there's so much to talk about with you, but I really want to sink in the education and then, the 9-to-5 job. This is the most perplexing thing. I'm dying to get to. You for 18 years, been in a compliance and transformational organizational change kind of role in a traditional. So what was your dream? Because we'll go back to it and talk about the gender dream gap. But like, what was your dream at that point? Maybe not at early age, but as you went into college, what was the dream then?
Oh, so this is going to shock you or not. My dream from the moment that I laid in that bed and my dad came into the room and I went through a year of, having a surgery, going through treatment and becoming well and competing in my first pageant, going off to college. My dream was consistent through all of that. And I had a plan to become a pediatric anesthesiologist. And I, went into undergrad thinking that is exactly what I was going to do. I majored in chemical engineering. And halfway through undergrad, I decided I'm going to add computer science because I don't know if this chemical engineering thing was the right move. And then about senior year of undergrad, I did a shadow, like a whole month, a trauma center. So my uncle was the cardiothoracic pulmonary surgeon something.
Smart and important guy. That's what I call him.
Brilliant. He was working at Highland Hospital on the trauma team. And so he's like, yeah, you got to do a study. Come do it with me. We're going to have a blast. And, you need to do this before you take your MCATs and all the rest of this stuff. Right. And so I'm like, cool, let's do it. And I got to like the last week and I was thinking, this is great. I love this. I'm going to really kick butt as an anesthesiologist. This is the career for me. And so maybe this chemical engineering thing was a good decision. The last week, There was a gunshot victim that was flown in on a helicopter. They went up to go get him. My instruction was to go to the observation, and they were going to be taking him straight into surgery. Perfect. It's exactly what I did. They came in, and I saw my uncle straddling this patient, and he had his entire hands around his heart or one hand around his heart, and he's massaging his heart to keep it pumping as they're trying to wheel him into surgery. So when I woke up, and no figure out they all knew why I blacked out. I had so much pumping through me. When I saw that, it was more about the thought of life and death than it was about the blood in what I was looking at. Because I had already seen a brain surgery. So I've seen an open brain, and I've seen them operate on it. I've seen them remove literally the top of someone's skull and move it over. Did not faze me one bit, right? And I've seen blood, and did not faze me. But I passed out. And so I missed the whole surgery, which I was really irritated about. But I thought to myself, maybe med school isn't going to really work out. I couldn't resolve in my mind the responsibility of having someone's life in my hand. And as an anesthesiologist, that is your entire job, right? Your entire job is not to put people to sleep. That's easy. It's to keep them alive through the surgery and wake them up, right? And so the weight of life and death was something that I said, maybe it's not for me. And keep in mind, I was really young at the time, too. I think if I was doing that now at the age that I am, which I will not say the number, I now understand that, my perspective is that God's the only person who can determine life and death, right? As a physician, you are a vehicle, you are an instrument that he's going to use in either one of those outcomes. And your job is just to do the best that you can do in that moment. And so you really don't determine life or death. But what was I, 19, 20? When I was going through this, that's not how I saw it. And I did not want to be responsible for somebody's loss of life. And so I said, the good thing I double majored, I'm going to use that computer science degree. So I became a software engineer after I graduated.
So you became I didn't know that, a software engineer.
Yeah.
So fascinating. But then you went on to did you get your master's? I know you have your PhD. I don't know if you could, were you like, Dr. Kennedy Garcia just sounded too good? Oh, you have two masters, of course. Oh my goodness. So
but not even because I'm a nerd, right? And if I hit the lotto, I don't know about you, but we sit around in our house and talk about what will we do if we hit the lotto? Because my husband plays the lotto all the time, right? And they all think I'm crazy because I'm like, oh my God, I would be a professional student. I would have every single degree they offer in the things that I'm interested in because I love learning. I love knowledge. I thrive in. And if I could go to school every day, all day, and not have to worry about being financially sound, that's where you find me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably what you and I don't know if you know Nicole, that's very much her personality. She's got her undergraduate degree from Yale. She's got her master's from Johns Hopkins. She's a total nerd, Mensa level brain with a, crazy ass personality. But I get it. I get that DNA.
Nicole, what are you doing over there? I'm finally getting up off the virtual couch and making some career moves, just like you told me. And I came across your authenticity playbook. Yeah, I forgot to tell you about it. This authenticity playbook I've had for a long time, and it's actually the most downloaded resource I have. It's basically 10 quote unquote plays, authenticity plays that you can make at work to stand out and get promoted and use authenticity as your strategy, your secret weapon. Now, I'm really going to take this to heart because despite all the sports references, I know that it's full of your awesome and your authenticity, and it probably is going to help me go far or go home or go big or whatever the sports reference is. all the things. So listeners, if you also want the Authenticity Playbook, you can go to beauthentic.com/playbook, and you can make career moves like Nicole. Whoop, whoop, Heisman!
So I want to hop now into, I don't know what sequence, but most of our listeners are women in corporate America. Most of them sort of 40 plus. They've been doing the beat for a long time. They're just trying to thrive, right? They're trying to get the promotion, but also balance things at work. And I know that most of our listeners also just really desire to have, a passion project, to leave and go do something more passionate, to, maybe break away at some point. You're doing it all. But I want to sit in the corporate first, so I had to double check your LinkedIn today. I'm like, nope, she's still at Kaiser, still there and doing 1,700 other things. Talk to us a little bit about, you entering sort of the corporate world, corporate America. And what do you think were one or two things that created your success, in that sort of traditional trajectory part of your story?
Yeah, I think the foundation of feeling like I knew that my professional purpose was to impact lives through health, right? So the purpose has never changed. The positions have changed. The companies have changed. The tactics to reaching the strategy has changed, but the purpose has always been the same. And so from the time that little girl wanted to be a pediatric anesthesiologist, that was about impacting lives through health. When I decided to become a software engineer, I developed for a company that supplied CRM solutions to healthcare organizations. Right. And so it was, it was marrying intention and purpose to action. And I think that is part of the secret sauce to finding success professionally. Right. And then I transitioned from being a software engineer into, leadership roles, even within that particular organization. Ended up going over to Kaiser Permanente as an organizational change strategist. And primarily because of my background with technology, and also I got a master's in public policy. And so that became this, then maybe you want to do stuff on the policy side and less stuff on the technology side. I'm like, let's talk about it. I will say that the last 3 jobs that I've had within Kaiser Permanente, I've been there 18 years, and in this role I've been in for 5. But the last 3, they weren't even jobs that were posted. They weren't even jobs that existed. They were jobs that were created for me because I had a conversation with someone, or I had a sponsor or my mentor, said, hey, here's some things that you're really great at. And here's something that this functional area is really struggling with. And I think this will be a match made in heaven for you. We should set up an interest meeting. And from those interest meetings became, hey, Kennedy, you want to write your job description?
So for those people listening are like, yeah, I know about mentors, I know about sponsors, but I really want to dive into, what did those conversations look like? What did you do differently? What can our listeners do to get to a place where somebody is saying, hey, what if you wrote your own job description? What if you could do, the intersection of what you're good at and what you're passionate at right here and now, not as an entrepreneur, but like in our organization? Go a layer deeper. Like how do you think that was sparked within these conversations?
If I'm being totally honest, I think some of it is sparked from frustration, right? So I am a problem solver and I can't help myself. There's nothing I can do to change who I am. I am wired to solve problems. If I see a problem, if you tell me about a problem, I want to solve it. So I'm also a person that if you don't want me to solve it for you, because some people just want to vent, right? They don't want you to solve everything. They just want to tell you something. They need a sounding board. I am the person who says to people, when you start, let me know if this is just venting or if we are being thought partners right now, because I'm going to start thinking about solutions as soon as you tell me what the problem. And if you don't want that, I'm here to just listen, right? But I need to know that that's how you want me to show up.
Yeah, it's really important.
Right, it is. My natural inclination is to solve. And so I think where these conversations happen with mentors and sponsors are sort of like, what's frustrating me at the time? What's frustrating them at the time? I remember when I was a software engineer, I was the only woman of color in the room. And half of the staff, when I came on board, wouldn't even do peer coding with me. They didn't even, this was a long time ago. This was so long ago. And now you're going to be able to figure out how old I am. Y2K, when we had Y2K and they thought the world was going to end because we were having New Year's and we were going to a different year and they thought all the systems couldn't handle it. They made us work on New Year's Eve. And this was the first time that my coworkers who didn't want to interact with me because they couldn't figure out why this 21-year-old girl of color, because that's what they called me, was even on the team with them. They couldn't figure it out and they didn't want it. But it was the first time that we had to literally work overnight together, and people brought their kids in and they set up play areas for the kids, and we had pizzas, and it was really fun actually. And guess what? The world did not blow up.
Yep.
So we were good, but it was the first time that they interacted with me. And I think it was because we got a chance to get to know each other on a personal level instead of them just seeing what they see and, knowing my age or whatever it was. And so I think, but in that frustration, I created a women's group for the women of STEM, is what I called it, because I wanted to include everybody, not just developers. I created my first women empowerment group because I was frustrated over how I was being treated. And I knew that if it was happening to me, it was happening to somebody else. And creating that group and getting people together to support it is what led to the discussion I had with my then boss, Cesar D'Souza, who I'll never forget. And he said, your leadership is even greater than your ability to code and how you do your job, and you're great at your job, but your leadership is what's different. And I got my first promotion based on something I did out of frustration. Right. And I think that is just carried into my career, threaded through there over and over, because if I find something that I think this isn't how we should operate, this isn't working for us, or this isn't protecting the people that we say we're, people are our greatest assets. That's what we say, right? So let's let that be true. And here's what we can do about that. I ended up, getting this additional responsibility of developing culture within Kaiser Permanente because I was frustrated, right? And so I think, if I could tell somebody who is entering the corporate space and trying to figure out what their path is, find something that irritates the life out of you so much that you can't sleep without thinking about how you can solve it. And then solve it. Right. Yeah. And take those ideas and partner with people who have the power to change the situation. Don't spend your time talking about it in the bathroom with a person who's just as frustrated and can't do anything about it. Spend your energy with the people who actually can change it, and start with the ones who care.
Yeah. And it obviously that leadership, when you weren't told you're technically a leader, led to great things for your career. What did that moment, starting that group, do for your, I guess, enjoyment and tempering of that anger at work? Did it make it more fun to come into work every day? Was there a light bulb that went off maybe in that first real leadership moment you had there?
I think it made it feel normal. I think it normalized, number one, the stuff that I was feeling, because everybody else had their own experience, but they were sharing in that same frustration. Right. And you quickly could see the people who are like-minded in a sense of, how do we change it?
Yeah.
Versus the people who are like, it's just what it is and it's always going to be this way, so I'm going to accept it, which is the opposite of my personality, right?
Yeah.
I don't accept anything if you tell me it's just going to be like this and it's never going to change. I don't deal in absolutes. I don't believe in nevers and alls. Right. And it's like, there is potential for change in all situations. And it's just finding the right lever to pull to make it happen. And so I'm relentless on trying to find what that lever is. And I found my people, right, who are like, yep, we're down. We're going to do it with you. Let's figure this out. Because at the time I was having my son and I'm like, he's a boy. He won't have these sets of challenges. But what if he wasn't? What if he was a girl? And as a boy who still would have really gone through some things being in the introduced in the environment that I was introduced to, simply just because of who he was, the skin he was born into. And like, why isn't that enough to change the situation?
Yeah.
Right. So if you don't do it for yourself, do it for the people who are going to come after you and experience, hopefully not the same thing, but could experience the same thing because you didn't do anything about it. And I just could not let that be the story.
Yeah. What was the proudest thing that came out of that work group? I know it was a long time ago. Obviously, your career did, but what's something you guys implemented? I'm curious, or were able to affect?
So I will say, because I've always been a lifelong advocate of women and children, I will say that the greatest accomplishment was we created this bring your kid to work or bring a kid to work, not didn't have to be your kid. And we purposely sought out to bring girls into our environment. And we wanted to do that because, we still have a, underrepresentation when it comes to women in STEM, right? And this was before everyone was sort of on that bandwagon. But the women who were trying so hard to stay in this space, we felt like if we can expose another generation to this, and we can fix some of these landmines that they will encounter when they get here, we'll be setting this up so that we can expand and see more women in STEM field, right? And so I think that, for me anyway, was the greatest thing that we did. We exposed kids who otherwise wouldn't know anything about programming, who wouldn't know anything about digital design and all of the things that, all of the careers that were represented in that group. We exposed these kids and we partnered them up with a mentor that they could check in with and ask questions. And so it wasn't just this one-time thing where they could show up and shadow us for a day. It was really this ongoing, what are you interested in? Let's, give you some exposure to that. And hopefully you will decide to go to college and step into this kind of career when you finish. So
I love that.
I think that was the greatest thing that came out of it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I want to fast forward really quick and then rewind again. So, I mentioned this opening. You're involved in everything. You've got your own business, spiritual boss chick. You've got a podcast. You are an interim CEO of a company. You're a board member of Makers, which is ginormous. You run a nonprofit. You've got how many presidential awards? And not to mention, you are also beauty queen and have several crowns and are in the running for, is it Mrs. USA?
International.
Mrs. What is it?
International.
Oh my God. It's amazing. Okay. So we just quickly fast forwarded and now everybody's head spinning again. What I want to understand is, what was that first thing? Because again, I think so many people listening think in binary, like you either do the 9 to 5 or you're an entrepreneur or you either work for a paycheck or you work for a passion, and they're not the same. You're obviously doing all those things, which can make our head spin. But what was the first thing where you're like, I can do this? Talk to us about how that got started, and then how do you do it all? Like, if for those people that are like, maybe I want to at least do one of those things that Kennedy is doing while I also work, my traditional job.
I will. So first, I think timing is everything, right? My son is a fully grown adult and does not require the level of energy that he did when he was a teenager or like, in his adolescent years. And so it has really freed up some me time, which I've used it's still me time and I'm using it to, take care of me, but my needs are about fulfilling purpose, right? I could use it to go to the spa and have spa days with girls and all the rest of that. But again, going back to intentionality and feeling like I'm on borrowed time, I have all of these gifts, right, that God has bestowed upon me. And my dream is to die empty. I do not want to leave this world with all of this talent and knowledge bottled up, and I've not shared it everywhere I could with everyone that I could. And so there's only so much of that you can do in a corporate space. And when I decided to create Spiritual Boss Chick and do something in the entrepreneurial space, it wasn't because I didn't love my job. I love my job. I love what I get to do. And I feel honored to do it every day. And so it wasn't, there's always this 80-20 rule. You love 80% of it and there's 20 that you're like, I just got to muscle through that part, right? But 80% of it I absolutely love, and I don't. So I'm not one of these entrepreneurs that are out there like, girl, you need to get rid of your 9 to 5, right? It's like, pump your brakes, Turbo. I don't need to get rid of my 9. I love my 9 to 5. And I find purpose in the work that I'm doing. And as long as I'm feeling that way, I will continue to do that work. And when I no longer feel like that, then I will consider going into maybe a full-time entrepreneurial thing, or, who knows what Kennedy 3.0 will end up being. But the entrepreneurial space is creativity. It is freedom to touch as many lives in the way that I want to completely help them transform, right? And so for me, it is my breath of fresh air. The nonprofit organization that I started was because, remember I told you about the Women in STEM organization that we created when I was a software developer. I literally took the roadmap of that and said, why can I not still do this? Like, there's still girls in the world that need this support. There's still people who need exposure to certain things. There's still girls who are trying to go to college who can't afford to do it. And so I established the scholarship fund to make sure that I could support them in their dream of becoming educated professionals, right? I just created an app where girls can cultivate their leadership capabilities, because I feel like, we have right now what they're calling crisis in American girlhood. And part of it is because of the gender dream gap. Part of it is because of these equity pay gaps. There are like so many gaps when it comes to us. And so why can't we close them? Why can't we do that work? And
tell us more. What's the name of the app? Tell us more about that.
It's called Rain, and it's in beta right now. I can definitely send you a link because we're testing it out, and it's going great. There's so much information on there, and I do master classes, and people can take them at their own leisure. And there's information about what does true leadership look like, so that girls can start to imagine themselves as leaders, right? According to Harvard, you probably heard me say this before because I'm always talking about the importance of women in leadership, is that, 33% of organizations that are led by women have better results and outcomes, yet 82% of companies have a male CEO. It's like, what is happening here? Are you listening? Right? And so I figured that leadership development is just not prioritized for girls. It's not prioritized. And then for women, we get into these corporate spaces anyway, and there are so many landmines that we have to navigate and move around that it's difficult to reach the place that you're trying to get to. And so if I can help, number one, develop the capabilities that people need to be great leaders, and on the back end, work with organizations to create a reduced landmine field for women and actually produce seats at the table through these board affiliations that I have, like, that's golden to me. It's gold.
So good.
And so I think you find time for the things that you're just extremely passionate about, right? Because people say, well, how are you doing all of this? You work a 9 to 5, you've got this nonprofit, and I have a show with my best friends where we
Yeah.
kind of talk about this stuff. But I think you find time for the stuff that you're passionate about. And that's how you truly understand what's important to you, right?
Okay.
But it does help that I don't have small children running around who need my attention. It helps that I have a very supportive husband who actually agreed to take all of our discretionary income and put it into a scholarship fund for girls. Like, it helps to have, the lifestyle of support and love around you to do it. But it is really about how passionate are you and how much does it mean to you?
I so appreciate, I know I was sort of snarky at the beginning, like you're doing all this stuff and it's making me feel bad, right? But I appreciate, first of all, you recognizing, I think those little things like, hey, if you've got a 4 and a 6-year-old, like don't think it, you can start, six things like I have in the last however many years. At the same time, you're 100% right. And I think that's the big message for people is that if you A, have something you're passionate about, and B, have just enough confidence to take the first step, which is also key, right? Passion, but has to meet like some sort of resilience, confidence that you can just start messily trying and figuring shit out, right? Like, even though you're a software developer, you've never developed an app probably before, right? Especially in the space of, with the business model you're doing. And you're right. When you're, that's why I always coach people. Like, I'm just not a fan of discipline. I'm a fan of being inspired and motivated and having creative ideas that are your own, that you just, and to solve problems, there's a different propeller. Like, you literally want to do it at 9 o'clock at night instead of, watching Netflix. So I really appreciate that honesty. And I think, that's one of the things that I think is such a great message for our team, is that you can do these things, even if it's starting out, small, with just, establishing a scholarship fund, which isn't small in its impact, but in its complexity, right? There are things you can Google and you can, other people have done it. I know we only have a little bit more time, but I want to spend some time. Nicole would kill me if I didn't spend some time, because I asked her, she went to your workshop at She Who Wins. I was not able to attend it, where you talked about wealth and definition of wealth. And I actually listened to the podcast episode you did on this topic. And in particular, I wrote down time wealth. I mean, because you talk about 5 different types of wealth, but talk to us a little bit more about this redefinition of wealth, and maybe spend a little time too on the time one, that I think was one of them that really blew Nicole out of the water.
Yeah, I think, when we think of wealth traditionally, we think of financial wealth, right? And we think of, oh my gosh, how do I amass a portfolio of real estate and investments and, salary, and create wealth from all of that. And, I think it hit me when I lost my father that I didn't care anything about the things that he bought me. I don't miss the money he spent. I don't think even the money he left behind it didn't console me. It didn't fill the crack in my heart that was left from his presence no longer being on this earth. And the same thing that I heard him say when I was sick was like, I would give everything I own for you to be well. I said out loud, I would give everything I have for time. If I could just get time back, if I could just get that one hug, if I could just literally hear his voice instead of the one that I replay in my head, if I could just get some time. And so it really shifted my own perspective of wealth, because all of these years of chasing the bag and, worried about how much, what's on the bottom line, and how much did we make at this, and how much are we, it's like, well, that's not what peace and fulfillment comes from for me. I can't speak for anybody else. right? And so my definition, my way of redefining wealth was to consider time much more valuable than any other resource. It's the one thing you can't renew. You can make more money. Even if you lost it all today, you can make more money tomorrow, right? If you lost a house, you can buy another one. It's like time is the one unrenewable resource. Yet we're all walking around acting like we know we're going to have it. And it's not promised to any of us. And especially a person like me who feels like you're already on borrowed because you were supposed to be taken out a couple of times before now. I truly, truly honor the importance of what time is. And I think my love language is all about experiences and people having experiences around me. And so I'm a gift giver, but when I give gifts, I always give an experience. So like I have a girl that I mentor who I love. Her name is Berlin. And she at the time was 13. And I was like, have you ever been to, she's into pageants. And I was like, have you ever been to Miss Teen USA? And she's like, no, you can go to that? Oh my God. And so I like arranged with her parents for me to take her for a weekend and have her experience something that she had never experienced before. And the joy that I got from the time that we spent and watching her face and how much fun she was having and how she'll never forget this. You couldn't give me $1 million to replace that feeling. Right. And so it's not just time, it's also how we use the time is what really creates the wealth.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. And Nicole gave me sort of the cliff notes. I remember after your session, and even just from the cliff notes, I remember, and I still think like how much more mindful I've been because she talked about this. And, you know, even in the gym when I'm like, usually you want the time to go by faster, like this morning, it's like, really, we're doing another 60-second interval. But I have literally, I'm no BS here. I have literally thought, don't wish away that 60 seconds because I'll never get it back. Like corny as heck, but it came from you, Kennedy. It came secondhand. I think it's super, super powerful. And I think you're right. It's how you use it and how you're mindful of it when it's going by, right? So that it feels longer than it does versus just waking up. Speaking of time, we're out of time. I could talk to you, of course, for days. I have one last question, but before I do that, where's the best place for folks to love on you?
Best place is always going to be Instagram. It's the one app that I look at every day. And matter of fact, Berlin set a little screen reminder on my phone so that I know how much time I'm spending on social media.
Oh my gosh, the student becomes the teacher.
Right. She's doing great things, let me tell you. It's me. She is on the road to being a great leader. But it is the thing that I use most. So at Spiritual Boss Chick on Instagram is definitely the place to love on me. And I will definitely love you back.
Yeah. And love on her and follow in July. She's heading to Tennessee for her international competition. We'll be screaming and cheering through the.
Can't wait. Yeah. And this is going to be it. I'm retiring after this.
You are. Oh, yeah. You should see her face. I don't know people. So my last question, super not personal, but at the She Who Wins event, you were dying over Renee's dress, like basically trying to rip it off her body for your competition. Were you successful in either getting that dress, getting her designed, or what are you gonna wear at this competition? I need to know.
So her dress was so amazing. And I was like, oh, it's my jam. It's got the one shoulder thing going. I'm a one shoulder girl. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so I need a great interview dress. And that was a fantastic option. So I have spoken with the designer and we may be creating something of my own to wear at International.
Yay. Yay. Okay. Got it. See, you have to follow her on Instagram to see the dress and all her inspiration. And just thank you so much for being who you are, with your earned privilege, with your impact, with your inspiration, and your just sincere glow. I am so honored that we are friends and that you came on and gave us the gift of time for an hour with our audience. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And hopefully next time we'll talk about how you can help me finish this book since you are an accomplished author yourself.
Yes, anytime. Let's do it.
Friends, do you have other friends? Are they adults? Are they out in the world somewhere? Please, please, please invite them to listen to our podcast.
Okay, dude, you sound like a late night, like 2 a.m. infomercial. Basically, what she's saying is our love language is ratings, reviews, and sharing the podcast. We'd love nothing more. And if you would do that.